Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so thrilled to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author, and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, especially now, but we're in this together, and thankfully, we have some wonderful people helping us along the way. When a child or teen comes to their parents and says, "I'm gay," in any way that they do, parents are often left with many unanswered questions fueled by fear, lack of knowledge, or concerns about the well-being of their child. The conversations that need to take place are not as much about you answering questions for your child, but about your child answering questions for you. Your child has likely been navigating the coming out process for quite some time now, and you will be faced with decisions about how you will react to this information. How will you share this information with others? How can you best support your child? What if you fear for their safety? What's the deal with pronouns? You might also grapple with how your child's sexuality fits in with your faith, your previous hopes and dreams for them, and your relationship. Well, it doesn't make sense to stick our heads in the ground. It's time to learn the answers for everyday questions and concerns when you are a parent, aunt or uncle, teacher, grandparent of a child who is gay. For guidance on this topic, we have Kristin Russo on the show today. Kristin Russo is a writer, speaker, educator, and consultant with a focus on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer issues. She is also co-host and producer of Buffering the Vampire Slayer, alongside musician Jenny Owen Youngs, which was named one of the top 30 podcasts of the decade by Paste magazine. She has a great book with co-author Dan Owens called "This is a Book for Parents of Gay Kids." I am so very excited to have you on today, Kristin. So welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really thrilled to have you. It's such an important topic. Parents really care. We have such a great and loyal audience who are just so excited to get the information so that they can have these tough conversations, but these conversations we have to have. But before we get into the thick of things, for those who haven't had the opportunity of reading your book or hearing your podcast, would you take a moment to tell us what gets you up in the morning and what got you so interested in writing a book for parents of gay kids?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think that there's a lot that gets me up in the morning these days. There's so much going on in our world. And my work intersects with, queer issues, even through the podcast that I do about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My work with the LGBTQ community is always my top priority. And the community over there, and certainly, obviously, the community that has followed my work specifically with LGBTQ communities is so powerful. And it's been incredibly powerful through the 2016 election cycle. It's powerful right now when people are living a life that we couldn't have imagined just a few months ago. And so those are things that get me up in the morning, knowing that I have the honor of being able to contribute. And I think that what got me here is that I am queer. I identify as queer, and I came out to my parents as bisexual when I was 17 years old, and this was in 1998. So the resources were, unfortunately, there aren't too many resources even still in 2020, but there are more. And I wanted to contribute to that conversation because my mom, especially, who was raised Catholic, had enormous questions that I couldn't answer for her, both because I didn't have the answers and also because I was 17 and that was not what I wanted to be doing with my time. Right.
This is your issue, not mine.
Yeah.
Yes,
and,
I get it. When you're
my
17.
mom would sort of corner people and say, like, corner queer people that she met and say, like, well, can you tell me anything?
Oh.
And so this book to me is very meaningful personally, because I wish that I had had it for my mom back in 1998. And I'm so glad that people have it now.
Oh, it's so important. Your book has so many questions that people have on their minds, so diverse in the questions, and it's very user-friendly, so easy to read, and you just provide the information that would be on a parent's mind. You start the book off with a chapter on coming out appropriately, and you say, kids come out to their parents in various ways, across a dinner table, in a letter, or through a song composed on their ukulele. Some coming out moments happen accidentally. Others are planned and thought out for months or even years. And you go on to talk about how, for some parents, they have had a hunch for quite a time, and for others, it comes as a surprise. But given that this podcast focuses on these pivotal conversations, and I think the one where a child shares their identity with their parents is pivotal, even if the conversations are ongoing, it's important to start with a conversation around this. So what should and what should we not do when a parent suspects their child is gay, and when they actually are told by their child that they are gay? Because give us some do's and don'ts.
Totally. And, this, I think what you outlined in what you just said is that everyone is going to have a different experience. There is no like cookie cutter, one size fits all approach, but there are certain guidelines that I think can be really helpful. In most cases, it is not great to ask your kid if they are gay or bisexual or queer or trans, if they haven't brought that to the table. If they've been dropping hints all over and you really know your kid and you really feel like they want you to ask,
right,
then, navigate that on your own and what have you. But usually a parent might pick up on something that a kid does not even know themselves. And I have personally lived that experience. My mom asked me if I was gay when I was 12 years old and for many years after. And I had absolutely no inclination. I was not thinking about, being attracted to people at that time. It made no sense to me. And it made me feel very self-conscious. Like, what am I doing that is giving off this signal to my parent? And so that can put a kid in a tricky position if they don't know yet. And it can also put a kid in a really tricky position if they do know, but they're not ready to have the conversation. I've had conversations with young people who have felt so awful because their parent asked them and they said no. And so now they're battling not only coming out, but also the fact that they feel like they lied to their parent, or that they have to go back on what they said. So usually it is best to let your kid come to you. And, you can, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but creating environments where kids can feel comfortable coming to you, that's totally in a parent's control. And
I loved when you said in the book, you want to be an askable parent. That is so very much integral to this podcast. Be an askable parent. Yeah.
And, in that, hopefully in an environment that you're creating where, you're talking about equal rights and you're talking about, people who are queer, watching television shows where there are, gay, trans characters highlighted and their stories are shown. Those are ways of like kind of giving your kid or kids the hint that you are a parent who's going to love them no matter what, be open to them no matter what, and be there for conversation and for learning. And then, in the second part of your question, you said, well, then what do you do when they do come to you? And I think that, so many of these conversations are always portrayed as this moment of like a coming out moment.
Well, they're videoed, right? So many of them are like all over the internet, and they're weepy and fabulous, and you're crying while you're watching them. Yeah.
Right. But I think like real life is a bit different than like these bites that we see through media. And I think that's really important to remember that this is not a one and done. This is like a process. It's a process for parents, family members, the kid who's coming out. It's ongoing. And I think the best first thing to do is in whatever way you normally would communicate that you love your child and you're thankful for them coming to you with a big part of them. Like that's what they want to hear and need to hear in that moment, right? Certainly not, I knew it.
I knew it. Or are you sure?
Yeah. Please don't.
Do
Right. Not, are you sure? But just like, if you can think about keeping it very simple and straightforward, that your child is sharing a part of themselves with you. That's like the goal, right? That's like the best thing that can happen in a family relationship, a parent-child relationship. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'm so happy that you trusted me with this part of yourself, and I love you, and I'll always love you. There will be things that happen after that, conversations that happen after that, but if you can start there, I think that's a very positive place to begin.
So important, and your wording is great. Let's highlight that script, that we're making sure that they know for sure that they are loved no matter what. There's nothing I say to my kids, there is nothing you can do or say that would make me take my love away. I love you every single day. And just keep saying those things. That's like right before they go to sleep. Every once in a while, I'll say something like that. And you nurture that in your kid. And throughout life you do. They make a mistake and you say, even though you made a mistake, I love you. There's nothing that you can do or you can say to me that's going to make me say I don't love you anymore. Right. So hopefully you've been nurturing that all along. And in this moment, it's not the first time that you're saying I love you. And this is, please, thank you for coming to me. And also, this doesn't change anything. You're still the same person. So reading your book, clearly you acknowledge the fact that many parents are fearful when they hear that their child is gay because they worry about their safety. I mean, their heart's in the right place here. In this day and age, people are still scared of different, even though they are way more accepting than they once were. Some parents might want their child to hide their identity in school or around the community or in a religious setting, given bullying or unfair treatment. So what do you say to parents who are scared for their child, and how do they approach their child with these concerns so that they know it's founded in safety and without going, I'm hoping you're going to hide what you just said to me?
Right. So I think that that's like the way that you phrase that is really important, because there is a way to have those conversations which are valid and real without it being something that makes your kid feel ashamed of who they are, and like with a way to let your kid know that you're always going to be standing by them. You're always going to be there to defend them. And those are really important points to have in those conversations. And so, again, this is going to differ from city to city, town to town, community to community, and also depending on what kinds of activities you and your kids are involved in. And safety can mean so many things, right? I think all of our minds immediately go to like violence, like physical violence. They might be physically unsafe, but there's also being unsafe in terms of what people might say to them, and making them feel emotionally unsafe. And so talking about those things specifically, what do we mean when we say, do you think you will be safe? Do you feel safe? And really, really getting to the heart of that, what that means, I think is important. And then, you can't force your child to hide who they are. Because that's unsafe too. That can be really unsafe for a kid to feel like, they cannot be honest about who they are in any circumstances. Is over time, especially, it can be really damaging.
Especially like mental health wise,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Because, if you're saying out of sort of one side of your mouth, like, you shouldn't be ashamed of who you are, but then on the other side, you're saying, but you need to hide it. That side can start to really dominate. And so I think that, talking to, if you're a parent involved in your child's school and you're worried about school safety, parents have a lot of pull at schools. Like, do you have other parents in the community who would stand on your side, on your kid's side, in terms of educating the school more, making sure that the school can become a safer space for them? If so, start those conversations, and be open with your kid, right? I'm worried about you. Do you feel you would be safe? What do you think would happen? Are there other kids who are out at your school? Let's really have that conversation openly. And if you feel like maybe they should wait a little while, or maybe tell a group of friends first before they do like a bigger public announcement, there's a lot of paths to follow. And I think that parents getting involved with the administration of the school is incredibly important. It signals to your kid it signals to your kid that you have their back. And it also signals to the school that there is a parent, or hopefully many parents, who are actively pushing for the school to take steps to make it a safe environment.
Just highlighting something that you're saying is the subtext that you really need to ask questions of your child. Like, are you feeling safe? Not just supposing that they are going to feel unsafe, not supposing that they are going to make a public announcement, but just asking, what will make you feel more safe? Yeah. How can I help you to feel more safe? How much involvement would you like from me to help you feel more safe? I don't want to be the mama bear that goes running into the school and giving them hell, but at the same time, I will do that if that's what you need.
Having a safe home environment is massive. A lot of young people feel unsafe at school and unsafe at home with being out. And so if you're already providing a safe home environment, that's massive. Even if a child is struggling in school, if they know that they have a place that they can come to that is safe, that is huge in a kid's journey through sexuality and gender identity. And you had brought up church, religion in religious environments. And so I just want to touch on that really quickly to say that if you don't feel like your religious community is going to be accepting of your kid when they come out, I cannot encourage you enough to find a different community because they exist. There are religious communities of every denomination who exist explicitly to accept people of all sexualities and all gender identities. And I think that, letting your kid know that they can still have a relationship with their faith while being open about who they are is so important. And it's hard to do because I know that these are like, people that but if your faith community is not going to accept your kid, get out.
Yeah, you talk about that in your book, and I when I'm reading about one of the people that you interviewed or sent in some information, it sounded like even like he absolutely accepted his child and they moved communities, but he sounded a little sad, and it is important to acknowledge that there is something that you need to give up when you want to protect and support your child in any case. And if people are not being accepting of your child, yes, you need to give something up, and it may feel a bit like a loss, but then imagine the gain of knowing that you walk into your religious community and feel like nobody's talking behind your back. And in this case, that guy, had all these friends, and all of a sudden they weren't talking to him anymore. I mean, it's you feel embraced. So not just talking about the loss, or let's say, some might view it as a sacrifice. Oh, I'm sacrificing what I once believed or who I used to hang out with, but that you can feel completely supported in another community, and to know that there will be open arms somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point. There's actually two really amazing points in there, but like the first one is that it is going to be hard. It's not like, I say these things, I talk about this a lot, and sometimes the way I say it might sound like I'm suggesting that it will be easy. It won't. It won't be easy, and it's totally fair to feel those conflicting feelings, and so much of the book that we're talking about is intended to let the parents know that they are going through a process too. And that's sort of like what was encapsulated in what you were saying as well, which is that not only, like I framed my answer just then around your kid needs to be in an environment, in a faith community, et cetera, where they can be themselves, but that extends to the parents too, because if you're in a faith community or any community, any group of friends where they don't accept your kid, you also are closeted in a way, right? Like you also are not being your full self because you're sort of keeping a bit of your truth to the back, and that's also going to affect the parents too, the family.
I mean, a lot of that is based on fear and worry that you're not going to ever feel like you're supported, or you feel like you shouldn't be thinking about yourself. But everybody needs support and everybody wants to feel welcome. You certainly don't want to be walking around feeling like, people are pushing you out or you're no longer good enough. That should not become your problem, that other people are having trouble with that. So for those parents who admit in your book that they wondered if being gay was a choice, hoping it is a phase and the child will grow out of it, what might you say to them, and what should they do in order to then wrap their brains around gender identity of their child when they are feeling resistant?
Right. Well, so part of the answer is even in the way that you said that, right? That like those kinds of questions are more about you as the parent than they are about your child. And that's a really important thing to be aware of, for starters. I remember when we were writing this book, we worked with an amazing publisher and an amazing editor. And I think that, as knowledgeable as they were, I think that when we came to this question of, is it a choice? They just expected the answer to be no, right? Because we hear that over and over again. We've heard it for like a decade. It's been like a mantra, like it's not a choice, so accept your kid. And I really fight against that kind of narrative because it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if it's a choice or not a choice. It's implying that you have to accept me because I couldn't choose otherwise implies that my way of living is bad. It's not good, but it was forced upon me. I didn't choose it, so you gotta accept me. I think it's just not a good framework. And so we had really, really great conversations with the editors and the publisher and stuff through that process to say, I'm not willing to just put no. I want family members to ask themselves why it matters. And I think that's the same thing with is it a phase, right? What it shouldn't matter. Like your kid is telling you who they are today. All of us know that like as years pass, things change. We change. So do you know who you're going to be for the rest of your life? Nobody does. But your kid is telling you who they are today, and you have to accept that as their truth today. It shouldn't matter who they are in 5 weeks or 5 years.
I think that's really genius, and what an important nuance to go into, because that acceptance has to be rooted in just, this is my child today, this is my child yesterday, this is my child tomorrow, and I'm embracing my child, period. So I think that's a really nuanced answer. Now, you spend some time in the book talking about how the information regarding your child's sexuality is to be shared with others. And some question whether the parents should be telling others, if the child should be telling others, or if nobody should be telling anybody because it's nobody's business. What are the guidelines around telling family? I mean, like, let's say the child is just told their mother, and now there's other people living in the family or extended family, close friends, schoolmates, or the mailman, as you put it. Like, what are the guidelines?
Right. We had so much fun with this section of the book too, because we made like a very fun flow chart of sort of like, answer this question, does your kid want you to tell other people, yes or no? Okay, follow that arrow, right? And I think that what that underlines is that this is going to be different for every kid and every parent, every family structure. But it once again comes back to communication with your child. Your kid might be like, please tell all of my aunts and uncles and grandma. I don't want to deal with it. You just do it, And if you're comfortable with that and your kid is comfortable with that, then great. But, they might not be ready. You might not be ready. And that's the conversation that needs to happen first before people are told, right? I think a lot of parents accidentally, and something I should say. So I was going to say a lot of parents accidentally are like, I already told Aunt Susie, I didn't know, and so the communication first is important. But I'm saying a lot of these, like, don't do this, don't do that. I started at the very beginning of this conversation saying, like, don't ask your kid. And I know from having had these conversations for many years now that some parents are listening and they're like, oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, we are all about, like, the apology, the do-over. Right. Like, no, absolutely. We're going to make mistakes.
Yes, because, I'm talking to you as someone whose parent did nearly everything, quote, incorrect, right? Like
they did not have your book to be, to be fair.
Yes, it's a process, and you can always go back. You can always open up these conversations again. So if you've done any of these things, don't feel like, oh no, I've ruined it.
Yes, no, like the complete feeling of whoops, and oh my goodness, look what I just did, and looking back. But yes, we can always have a do-over. We can always revisit the conversations. Absolutely.
Right. And when it comes to telling other people, I really encourage parents and family members to recognize that this is a coming out for you too. Like it is going to feel hard and uncomfortable. And it's a great way to feel connected to your kid because you are having some semblance of what experience they're having when they come out to people. It's not the same because you're not talking about yourself, but it's hard to say these things to people sometimes. You don't know how they're going to respond, and that their response might impact your relationship. And so that's scary and that's big. And we do it because that's what we have to do to like ensure that our families are able to be truthful about who they are. But don't judge yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself if you hesitate or if it feels like a big thing to lift. It is. That's real.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that and acknowledging all of those issues that people are struggling, that they are going to mess up. In every conversation, there is that risk, but we still need to have them. And one of the conversations that I think is really tough, and no matter who you're talking to, is about the birds and the bees. I was grateful that you had a chapter on that in the book. We have discussed how to talk to kids about sex, about puberty, about porn, about consent, about romance on this podcast. It's a topic that I like to explore from every angle because it is one of the toughest because I think you mentioned in the book it has like an ick factor to it. Like you have to like think about your children like engaging in but you do need to put your big girl pants on, your big boy pants on. You gotta get ready. So in your book, you have this chapter about sex and you say the issue outright, whether you are on the comfortable or mortified end of the sex talk spectrum, you are now faced with the prospect of engaging in a dialogue about kinds of sex with which you have little or no experience. I'm sure the people who are listening right now are like, yes. So with our adult pants on, if our child has told us that he or she is gay, and you want them to have the information about everything from the mechanics to the safety to the consent, how do you wind up tackling that question of how does sex work when the people who are engaging in it are gay? What do we need to know? And what do kids really want to know from their parents?
Right. Well, and so again, it's going to be so different depending on what kind of relationship you have with your kid. I had the kind of relationship where if my parent even brought up the idea of sex, I put a pillow over my head. Shut up, shut up, shut up. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to. Please, no. But I know that I have friends that wasn't their relationship. I've had conversations with people who their parent knew that they responded really well to a written thing, so they wrote them an email instead of sitting down face to face. Right? There's a lot of options, and I don't think that they're obvious because we just all know of like the sex talk.
Yes. And it is not the sex talk, everybody. Remember, it's a series of many, many talks over a long period of time.
Yeah, you can't fit it all into one conversation. No. So I think like something that I like to start with is the general idea that because it can be really overwhelming when you think about like, I only know, quote, straight sex, but then there's all this gay sex. And it's like, really, when you break it all down, sex is sex is sex is sex. There are fluids. Fluids carry things inside of them, and we might exchange them during sexual relations with other people. There are many ways that can happen. And being heterosexual does not mean you are only having one kind of sex. I think we all know that. And so that, I think, can sometimes alleviate a little bit of the extra fear that parents might feel. If we really think about the fact that no matter who our kids are, what their sexuality is, we need to tell them how to keep their body safe or safer. I guess that would be more accurate. That's a great place to start. And I think that, and this applies to any parent of any kids. You're not going to know everything, right? Unless you're, a doctor or, you have a specialization in talking about safer sex. Find resources that you can share with your kid and with yourself, because it's great to learn too, but point them in the direction of resources that are inclusive. I run a website called My Kid Is Gay, mykidisgay.com. It's sort of an extension of the book, and we've done pretty extensive work. You can click on topics, sex, and there are all sorts of articles and resources there that will give you more information and point you to places. There's also a pretty exhaustive resource list that gives you places where you can go yourself or point your kid to. Scarleteen is a resource that's online. They've been active for many, many, many years, and they are a sex advice site, and they are so inclusive of queer identity. So that you could send your kid there to a safe place where they will find to their questions too. So I think that, obviously we could talk about this for a long time, but we could. The bottom line is that no matter who your kid is, we all have bodies, they all have fluids. We need to explain various ways in which they can keep themselves safe. And you should have those conversations with your kid, no matter who they might be having sex with, because, it's just about safety, and there's not that much of a difference. And then point them to the places that they need to go to find more information.
I think it's a conversation that many parents trip up on for many reasons, and it is important to start early with these conversations and keep them open. I believe that many parents rely on a sex talk revolving on pregnancy and having babies, right? So that is a difference right there, that they can't rely on, here, I'm going to talk to you about how babies are made, and that encompasses the conclusion of our sex talking. Because it first of all, that's not right for anybody. Because the conversation does need to revolve around so many different topics. But if you know your child is gay, that's not going to be the number one concern of yours. You're going to need to really explore what it is that you need to be talking about. And I like the idea of really focusing on making sure you're keeping your body safe, and consent, and hopefully finding romance and love, and certainly the conversations that I've had with my own kids, because you want them to not be doing this with just anybody, hopefully, that they don't know or trust. And it's important to look further into this conversation, no matter who your child is. And I'm glad that I have your voice here and some of those resources, so that parents know where to go and also where to send their child. It says to your child that you're important to me, and that you can get your information from trusted sources. One of the things that we're very concerned about for any child, but certainly for kids and the LGBTQ and communities, is that because there is a lack of information coming from trusted sources like parents, that they're out looking for the information themselves because they want the information. So do you want to give them the information, or do you want them to stumble upon some kind of information?
Yes.
It really is
100%.
important. Yeah.
And I want to say too that earlier in our conversation, we talked about sort of making your home an environment where your kid will feel safe. And that extends to this too. I think a lot of parents think about, okay, now that they are, 14 or whatever age, like now it's time to talk about their body and sex. It's like, no. These conversations should start early in age appropriate ways. But there's a wonderful author whose name is Corey Silverberg, who's written 2 books. One that's for little kids. I believe it's called What Makes a Baby. And the second one is for sort of kids in the middle school, a little younger than middle school and middle school age, called Sex is a Funny Word. They are some of the most incredible texts that I've read, and they are so inclusive. They are inclusive of so many identities, so many abilities, bodies, and it's just a really powerful way. And what's funny about Sex is a Funny Word is it actually doesn't even get into like sexual intercourse. There's more conversation around your own body, consent, masturbation, things like that. And it's done in such an age-appropriate way and a responsible way, where it's not assuming the gender of your partnership at all. And What Makes a Baby is incredible because it also doesn't assume the gender of the body that includes sperm and egg. So these are ways to sort of open up conversations in responsible ways for your kids to understand, how fluid gender is and how much difference there is with sexuality in the world.
So such an important thing. And thank you for also bringing up you don't know who's got the ovaries in that situation. That's really valid and important. You mentioned in the book about pronouns. It certainly struck me because it's a conversation that we have fairly often now, because we're hearing more about different people in our own lives that are figuring out which pronouns they want to be using. I just literally spoke to a friend of mine yesterday whose child just recently, in the last 6 months, came out as transgender, but not exactly transgender. So it's a little gender fluid, and I'm younger, so I'm maybe not as completely clear as to all the language around that yet. Okay, so I think she might be 12, 13, and maybe is exploring that and has talked about they, them, but then there was a different spelling that was also explored, they, them, I think. And I am very curious about how we can understand pronouns and their importance. I think we should talk about their importance, but also how do we know what we're doing? Like, how do we do this? And as an English major, it's like you gotta just relax the rules here and embrace it. So I want to be as inclusive as possible, and I know a lot of people who are listening do, but I think there's some confusion around it. So if you can explain that'd be great.
Yeah, so I love the way that you asked this question. It sort of like encapsulates how overwhelming and sort of confusing and large these conversations can feel. And I think I can like picture your listeners hearing you and identifying so deeply with the way that you read through that on your own. And I think that's really important because I think that the word transgender sort of came into most of our consciousness by being this like very clear cut, like you are born and you were assigned a female, now you identify as male, right? And so we all thought we got it.
We thought we got it, especially like my friend Jessica Herthel, who wrote I Am Jazz, like the children's book with Jazz Jennings. Okay, so that I went to school with her. I love her. We love each other. She's amazing. I'm so, like, I got to read the galley copy. I'm psyched about the book. And it did feel so clear cut. So when my friend was literally talking to me about it yesterday and was like, okay, my child wants to have top surgery, but likes wearing earrings and wants to be a different name, but also is like 40% female some days, but 5% another. I was like, okay, like I want to support this. I just don't understand completely how this works.
Right. And I think like, so from my vantage point, as a person who has many trans friends and has had so many conversations, it's so exciting to me, right? Very different, I'm sure, that it feels for some parents who are just like, what? But what that is like is the fact that we are starting to pull apart gender in ways that I think can be really scary for people who have lived longer with a clear-cut idea of what gender is, but can be really exciting and empowering for younger people who are able to actually see gender as something very different than what we see it as. And so, embracing the fact that you're like, what? Like, that's okay. It's really just that you're not saying, what? No, I know that this is not true. It's just,
or they must have something wrong with them, or they should be checked psychologically, right? Like, people have all kinds of excuses.
And, because of course, the experience of coming out as trans is so different for everyone. And you have, perhaps a 16-year-old child who's saying, I'm coming out as trans, I identify as non-binary, I'm going to use they, them pronouns. I've journeyed through this, and this is what I'm telling you. It's clear cut, to put quotes around it, right? Like this child is coming to you at sort of, it's not the end of the journey, but they are establishing it as the end, right? Like, this is who I am, this is what you do, this is my name, these are my pronouns, right? But then you have experiences like the ones that you just gave voice to, where kids are coming to their parents saying, I'm exploring, I'm playing, and I want you to play with me. And by play, I'm not using that word lightly, like it's a game. I just mean like they are exploring what it is to be in their body in a world that says gender is one of two things, but knowing, thankfully, that it is not one of two things, and playing around with how they feel comfortable in their skin, how they feel comfortable being referred to. And as a parent, if you get to be a part of that journey, that is an honor and a privilege that is so wonderfully exciting, and not pressuring anyone to get there with the snap of a finger, but it is really beautiful if you get to be a part of that with your child as well. And to answer the maybe the easier question in terms of pronouns, I highly recommend that people download an e-care package that I have. It's completely free. All of the resources that I've created, both myself and with other people, are all free. MyKidIsGay.com. And we last year released an e-care package for parents of trans kids. Now, I wish that everyone would download it, because it was created by a team of people who identify as trans. And there are these worksheets that are remarkable that ask you to examine your own relationship to gender. Because I think that for so many people, they think, right, if I was assigned male at birth and I identify as a guy, then I don't have a relationship to gender, right? Like, I just am what the doctor said I am. So, but no, we all do, right? Some of us identify as women, and we love to get our nails done. We love to get our hair done. Some of us identify as women, and we're like, no way, no thank you to any of that. We all negotiate gender. And the more that we can understand that, the easier it is to understand what our kids are experiencing. Think about what you would feel like if you go by she, her, and somebody was calling you he, him. That's the dissonance, right? If you left your door one day and all of a sudden everybody was saying, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And you're like, what is happening? It's so dissonant.
Or calling you by a different name, or, it's jarring to you because it feels unnatural.
Yes. And it takes time. I use a metaphor all the time with like parents, family, friends who are adjusting to new pronouns that I thought of years ago, where if you have a desk and you have a garbage can, and your garbage can is on the right side of your desk, and you rearrange your office and your garbage can is now on the left side of your desk, for like at least a few weeks, you're going to be throwing your garbage right on the floor, right? and then you're going to go, almost throw it on the floor, hesitate, pivot, get it in the right place.
There you go. Or you correct yourself.
Exactly.
You throw it on the floor, then you pick it back up and you put it in the right spot. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
And so that's the mistake, right?
Yeah, you're forming new pathways, you know, and it's okay. It's a challenge, and just correct yourself when you make a mistake and try again, and use your kids' pronouns when they are not there as well, because otherwise you're not going to be able to make the adjustment. You can't only do it when they're in the room. You have to do it when you're talking to other people about them.
Yes. And one of my friends has, because it's newer, has told me that she winds up just calling her child by the name that she was told to call her by, and so not ready for the pronouns because my friend doesn't want to confuse her own self, like she's just trying, but it's just like I'm just calling my child by the name that I was given, and going from there. And I'm sure she will be able to navigate the pronouns and the child is actually still, like I said, trying to figure out the pronoun situation.
Right.
So I think that's great. Just to put high beams on this, that when you're talking about maybe using the correct pronouns for your child, that it really is important. When I did interview Jessica Herthel on our podcast on how to talk to kids about transgender youth, we were talking about how high risk this group is, and that many of them are cast aside by families. Many of them, have a high incidence of transgender youth on the streets. You've got a high suicide rate because they don't feel accepted. And by using the name that they're giving you and the pronouns that they're giving you, it acknowledges that they are important, they are valuable, and that they are part of your world. So I just want to underscore that as this is not a small thing, as you just told us that if you were being called by the wrong name or the wrong pronouns, it would be a big thing to you too.
Yeah. And using your kid's name and pronouns is a very clear way of saying, I recognize you, I believe you, I accept you, I love you. And I think most kids have room for the fact that when they change pronouns or name, sometimes you're going to slip. You've had, 12, 13, 14, 18 years of saying one thing. That's okay. I'm sorry. I recognize I just used, I didn't use the right name. Yes. And I'm correcting that. It doesn't have to make a big deal out of it. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Just recognize it, correct it. Forward moving,
Yes. And thankfully, my friend is so accepting and flexible and loving, and so is her family. I just had mentioned to her, just thank goodness that this child is in a family that is like that, because not everybody has that. So give us your top tip. What is the top thing that you would like everybody to come away with after listening to this podcast?
Oh, gosh, it's hard to narrow it to one, but I will say that I often wish that the title of our book, though it wouldn't be the best for the selling of the book, was just, this is a book for parents of kids. I really, truly believe that if you are a parent of any child, learning about the LGBTQ community, learning how to make your home one that is loving and welcoming to people of all sexualities and all gender identities, making your conversations inclusive is so powerful, because you never know how your child is identifying, and you also don't know who's in your child's life that might be going through things. So perhaps if I have to narrow it to one, it would just be that this is a message, this is a podcast, this is a conversation for all parents. It's not just for parents who think their kids might be gay or are gay.
Thank you for that. That is important, because everybody can be a supportive part of all kids and all communities. And that it's true that you don't know, even if your child is 7 years old and they've got friends over, you don't know who is going to be coming out as gay, bisexual, transgender. I mean, you may have a hunch every once in a while about certain children, but you want to make sure that they always feel welcome no matter who they are, just like you would hope your child feels welcome no matter who they are if they go to somebody else's home or they're in somebody else's community. Give us the resource of the week. Where can we go to get more information about you, your book, and the great work you're doing?
Well, I think that definitely applicable to this conversation, the website that I run, mykidisgay.com, is a pretty big site for finding all sorts of resources, downloadable e-care packages, all sorts of things over there. For me, my website is Kristin Noeline, KristinNoeline, and there you can find not only my work with LGBTQ communities, but also the podcast that I do, and that spelling of my name is also my Twitter and Instagram handles, and I'm fairly active on social media. So you can find me in any of those places. But certainly, if you want to dig more into what we talked about today, mykidisgay.com is just full of resources gathered over nearly a decade.
Perfect. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on today, for educating us, for talking to us about all these topics, and making what seems like difficult conversations seem much easier. So I just love what you talked about and with regard to inclusivity, but also feeling like we're included in this conversation, all parents, and that we can be part of helping people feel accepted and loved and valued no matter who they are. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for prioritizing a conversation like this. It's so appreciated.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours, so let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook. You can go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page. We can chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or twitter.com/Dr. Robyn. I am also on Instagram under Dr. Robyn Silverman, and I'll be creating some memes based on what you heard today. Kristin said some incredible things that I just thought to myself, there's a meme. I definitely want to share that quote. That is awesome. Then you can share it with your friends and family and followers. And if you love this podcast like I did, I hope you'll go up to iTunes and rate and review it so other people will learn about all the things that Kristin is doing and how to use her scripting, her solutions in your own home and in their homes. I truly appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today, my fellow parents, leaders, and educators. Thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com. There's so many great podcasts up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even when things are not going right, and we all have those days, you've got this. You're here, you're getting the information you need, and on the days that we fall short, you know we all have them. Never forget there's always tomorrow. We talked about that earlier. You may have said something, you may have done something, you may think, oh my goodness, what have I done? It is okay. You've got the information now. You can go back and you can try again. Parenting is the ultimate do-over. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know that you are 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.